welcome to our panel for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to give folks a couple minutes to come in. And while you are coming in and settling in, feel free to write your name, your role, and where you are calling in from into the chat. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. Thanks, folks. All right, we got some Midwest. We've got some West Coast. All right, of course, we got some New York. Hi, folks. If you're just joining us, we're going to get started in 3 minutes. So take some time. Please put into the chat your name, your role, and where you're from. And then if you have any questions, you can put that in the Q&A box, just so we can make sure that we get to those when we get to the live portion of the Q&A. Yeah. Oh, VHS, hello. Hi, folks. Welcome if you're just joining us. We're going to get started in about 1 minute. While you get settled in, please take some time to write your name, your role, and where it is that you're dialing in from into the chat. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put those inside of the Q&A box. Okay, so we will go ahead and get started. First of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who's joining us and welcome. We really appreciate that you're taking the time to listen in to us this evening. I want to thank everyone who attended our informational webinar last month. This event is the second of 3 webinars designed to provide resources as you prepare your submissions for the Rural Tech Project. So we've received a lot of inquiries from nonprofits and other entities who want to be involved in a rural tech project proposal. And so we want to make sure that interested parties who are looking to partner can find each other, and that you can learn from experts on what successful partnerships look like. To the first point, we've launched a database where you can share what services you'd like to provide or what you need for your team. And we are going to drop a link for that database into the chat. And we've brought experts here this evening who want to help set you up for success. So we're going to start by having the panel answer a few questions that we've received from you. Thank you to those of you who sent in questions via Eventbrite. And then we're going to turn it over to the audience for a live Q&A. To begin, we'll have the panelists tell you a little bit about themselves, and we'll start with Albert.
Thanks, Ishokay. My name is Albert Palacios. I'm with the U.S. Department of Education, Division of Academic and Technical Education, and we are the program office that is leading the Rural Tech Project. So I have been in this role for about 8 years now, and glad to bring this project to rural communities and to increase connectivity and participation in IT career pathways.
Perfect. And we will go over to Paula Bradley.
Hi, I'm Paula Barkley. I am currently an implementation coach with Ford Next Generation Learning, and I work with partnerships between business and schools, helping them design programs that are effective for teachers and students.
Excellent. And we'll go over to Paula Chaon.
Hi, I'm Paula Chaon. I am also with Ford Next Generation Learning. I'm actually a roadmap or a community coach. I am and reside in St. Johns County, Florida, which is just south of Jacksonville and north of St. Augustine, if you're familiar with that. And as to my connection with community engagement, I started out my work with education as an intermediary in a chamber of commerce. I then moved to a district and became a CTE director in St. Johns County, and then moved to a Fortune 500 company where I started IT academies that were branded with the company name, and they really needed help getting those off the ground. So I have been across the spectrum in a little bit of everything from education to business to chamber work. So, and I'm complete.
Thanks. And we're going to move on to Bruce Friend.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. My name is Bruce Friend. I am the head of school at Pine Springs Preparatory Academy, a K-8 charter school in Holly Springs, North Carolina, just outside of Raleigh. I've been in this role for a whopping 2 months, so very new to the job. Prior to that, I was the Chief Operating Officer at the Aurora Institute. A lot of people knew it as the International Association for K-12 Online Learning, or INACOL. And over the years have spent a great deal of time in my career working in distance learning, specifically online learning in the K-12 space. My connection with community relationships and partnerships is having had the awesome opportunity to work in a lot of different states in helping communities and schools come together through distance learning programs, specifically in states like Florida, Alabama, West Virginia, Arkansas. Come to mind, working with everything from virtual school programs to art museums to governors initiatives, and then most recently here in North Carolina, where I'm at, is having helped launch a few charter schools in our state, and all the charter schools that I had a hand in helping launch, including one that I'm sitting in right now, were also the first schools of choice in their communities, and that took a great deal of community building and community relationship work as well.
Excellent. And my name is Ishokay Smith. I use she and her pronouns. I am a senior associate at Luminary Labs, and I'm on the team that is helping the United States Department of Education run the Rural Tech Project. In a former life, I was an educator here in New York, and I spent a lot of time working with communities really to help them understand the ways that their schools were a big part of what comes next in any sort of planning for the future. So now that we have had our panelists talk a little bit about themselves, we want to hear a little bit more about you. So you're going to have a poll that's going to pop up on your screen. Please respond to the questions, and then we'll have a better idea of who's in the audience. The first question is, what kind of organization do you work for? The second is, if you are a school or a local educational agency, how many high school students do you serve? And then the last question is, what kinds of organizations have you collaborated with in the past, if any? Thank you to everyone for your rapid participation. It's really helpful for our panelists to have a strong understanding of, who's in the audience so that we can make sure that your questions get answered in a way that makes sense for you. So we'll give it another 15 seconds. And if you're just joining us, we're filling out this poll just to have a stronger understanding of who's in the audience, and how best we can help you. Okay, last call for the poll. Okay. I am seeing a few folks are saying that they're unable to submit. Yes, you can put your answers in the chat box. Okay. So this is a technical issue. If you are a person who does not have a school, right? I'm assuming it's the second question that folks are skipping over, for folks who are in nonprofit or for-profit organizations. I would ask that you choose the first response, so that 1 to 50, just so we can get the poll results. We will work through the fact that there's some inflation there. All right, I'm gonna give it another 15 seconds. Thank you, Amy. All right. All right. So you should see now that the poll results are up. You can see all of the results. We've got a pretty big population of schools and nonprofits, followed by local educational agencies. We also have a big population of folks who are serving more than 1,000 students, followed by a 500 to 1,000, and then our third category is 51 to 250 students. And then our biggest population of folks who have done a particular kind of collaboration in the past are other high schools or LEAs, which makes sense. And then we've got local colleges, universities, and then local nonprofits. Perfect. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of context about who you are. And we're going to move into our panel. So first, schools are currently developing plans for new technology education programs using distance learning and competency-based education for the Rural Tech Project. How much do schools need to have figured out about their program concept before they can start thinking about partnerships? Paula B., what have you observed from your experience supporting schools across the country?
Well, I think that the thing I see the most across the country is that schools need to know why they want to change, or what they want, why they want to do whatever it is they want to do. So people often start with what they want to do, and they need to know why they're doing it in order for it to be successful. So if they can answer their why and see how it connects to the outcomes they want to achieve for students, if they have a vision for how this business partner engagement will help them achieve those outcomes they're looking for, they're going to be able to put those processes in place to make it happen a lot more successfully.
That makes sense. So policy, how can we get community input into program plans? What are things that you found effective?
You know, I think what I've seen is that a lot of our tendency is to get as many people on board as we possibly can. And I think what really works is find few people who you are really connected to. This could be a Chamber of Commerce, a Rotary, your pastor, a friend who owns a business. Look for people who are connectors. They're the people that are, you know, everybody is talking to. They have their hand in a little bit of everything. And then really be able to think about the businesses that are around you. You know, it's a little bit of assessment, it's a little bit of research, but you know, even in today's COVID environment, what businesses are still broad enough to handle the requests that you might have of them? And if you think about it, you know, energy never goes away. It has IT, you know, IT and business are core departments within all of these particular businesses, and healthcare and government, and even education offices with their business office and transportation. So it's thinking about who are the businesses that really are surrounding you, and how can you create sort of that win-win opportunity. This isn't just about, it's not just about you. There's a balance of win-win. So my advice is always start small, and then even from the 5 that you recruit, they can help recruit people that they love to work with or that they know. What you want is an advocate, both for you, for your program, your students, and understanding the outcome. So the deeper you go with those 5, and you give them some resources like brochures or, you know, whatever sign-up form you might have, and they fully understand what you're going for, I think that is really gives you a ton of leverage for going deeper into your community.
Excellent. That's super helpful. So what are some common watch outs or pitfalls that someone might encounter when starting a new partnership? Bruce, could you start us off for that one?
Sure, I'd be glad to. That's a really great question. I've encountered some of those myself over the years. Sometimes you don't encounter them until it's too late, and they hit you broadside. I guess a couple of things I would say is just from the very beginning with all of your partners that you might be bringing to the table is having very clear expectations for what the project's about, establishing realistic goals that you're attempting to accomplish, being very clear on what each organization brings to the table. You know, is it sweat equity? Is it money? Is it what is it that they're bringing to the table, and being that established very clearly. Time commitment is really important for everyone to understand as well. And then, you know, maybe wrapping it all up is how are you going to measure success? Are all the partners aware of ultimately when this is over, how are you measuring success for the project that you implemented with your partners? I'm sure there's others on the screen here that have some experiences that make add on.
Yeah, Paula C., do you want to take that next?
Sure. I would say from a business partner's viewpoint, when I was with, it's don't waste their time. Be prepared. Know your ask, and be specific, but also be flexible, because it's it's a win-win. It's a dialogue. You're building a relationship. So make sure that You know, one of our rules, sort of as when I was a CTE director, is don't ask for money. It's the easiest thing to do, and I know you guys might cringe when I say that, but ask for time and talent. And when they bring their expertise to the table, you have to make sure that you're transparent. When you go in and talk about, here are the goals we're going to set, well, how are we going to get there? Then if you're transparent about the needs, like, okay, we can't afford busing, so we have to get rid of that. More often than not, what you'll see is business partners step up with opportunities and solutions if you set the goals first. If you ask for money, that is the how. You want to start with the why, and then what is it we want to do to create experiences for students, et cetera, and then how do we get there? And then the other thing to me is it's the 3 C's: communication, collaboration, and coordination. If you can nail that, like, business partners have this much time, so make sure that you're succinct or at least consistent, that you have a 15 or 30-minute meeting to keep everything up to date so that there is regularity to those asks. And I'm complete.
Thanks, Paula B.
I would extend what they're saying into, as you move through the relationship, some of the pitfalls become those of working together to make the plan, whatever it is, work. So making sure that there are structures and processes in place that both business and school can honor, and that work well for both parties, because we don't always speak the same language. We don't always know the rules and regulations that our companies have or that we have, as they don't know the ones we have as schools. So how do we make this comfortable for everyone with processes and structures that work for everyone? And then one of the biggest I run into is preparation. How do we prepare partners to understand and work effectively with teenagers? And we prepare students so that they can work well with partners? How do we prepare teachers for what that means for their classrooms, for teaching their standards, for applying those standards in the real world? All of that preparation work is so important to a successful partnership.
Excellent. Thank you all for that. So how do you prepare educators to get on board with a new program? As a former educator, I know this is its own challenge. Bruce, what have you seen educators, administrators, and partners do?
I think it's important. I guess I would answer that question a couple of ways. One is, I think it's very important to involve the educators early on in the planning of the project. Particularly that helps in securing your partners, because I think that the educators, they bring a lot of credibility, probably even more than they realize, to the table. Talking about, securing potential partners and what the outcomes might be for students. And an educator, to use Paula's words of being a connector and an influencer, they're the ones who can really speak about how this work is going to help them help their students and further advance their students. So I think it's really important to, from the implementation, and obviously helping them define, help you define what success will be. So I think that's really important, as opposed to just going out, securing these partners. We've got this project. Okay, now let's bring it to a teacher at the school. Hey, would you like to take this on? And there's not as much ownership in that sequence. I think the other thing here was the importance of the why as well. When you're in terms of, particularly in rural communities, I think it's the teachers are often really maybe some of the best people in the community that can explain why this is so important, because they see what happens when we're not preparing students for the skills and the knowledge they need to be successful, whether it's in IT careers or another other fields as well. So getting teachers involved in that explaining of the why is super important as well. So that's a long-winded answer, sorry, but getting them engaged early on as part of your planning team, really, really important. Frankly, brings more credibility to your.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I just wanted to add something real quick, based on what Bruce said, and also I noticed in the chat, Amy mentioned the time treasures and talent, I think it was. And that is when, coming from the business world prior to education, you know, businesses are oftentimes very happy to help and work with educators in the education systems. But whenever an educator approaches a business, the goal of the business is to make a profit. And to make, if you don't make a profit, you don't have a business. So whenever you approach a business, you have to frame it in terms of profit. If you do this, it will lead to A, B, or C, which will ultimately lead to more profit. You don't have to say the profit at the end, but, you know, talk about, well, it'll increase efficiency. It will reduce your training costs. It will reduce your, whatever the benefit is that you intend to provide. Make sure that you're selling that as a value proposition to the businesses, because that's what they're looking at. Some of them may have a willingness to serve the community through, you know, with, you know, jobs for students, but, you know, even a job for a student, that employer is making a sacrifice to employ that financial sacrifice, as well as the other administrative sacrifices to an investment in that student. So you have to make it worth their while. So just as you're kind of approaching for-profit organizations, that's just one thing to keep in mind.
Thanks, Albert. So we wanted to ask one last question before we shift over to the questions that we've received from the Eventbrite. Can you give, and this is open to anyone, can you give an example of a really effective partnership that you've seen, and like what, really thinking about what was the nature of the partnership and why was it so successful?
Yeah, I'll step out there first. And I think one of the things, we had a partnership with our electric authority. And the thing that we started with was pulling teachers in through teacher externships. And the way that I sort of sold the business on that is I said, you know, yeah, you can take 25 kids at a time, but if you take 5 teachers, their teaching load is about 100, 150 kids a day. And so if we are doing a project together and we can get these teachers to do something together, look at the exponential impact that you're having by doing teacher externships, is what we call them. So let's start with a field trip to get them to understand and you to understand what is our common ground. Like, what are the kids going to know before they come here? What, you know, what can we do to make sure that they are prepared? How will they be prepared? And then we act on that, but we educate teachers first, and then it becomes that next step. And when I was with Citibank, that's kind of how we started things. It was like small, and then we said, okay, well, that wasn't quite enough. We did a 1-week, you know, STEM camp for girls. Like, well, now what can we do? So, you know, if you start with a teacher externship that takes a day or a couple of days, then adding in the students becomes a natural next step. And then it kind of builds from there, but it's about maintaining that relationship as well. And I'm complete.
Thanks.
So I've had several working in academies with students, and it has started out with teacher externships. And we go from what we call the low-hanging fruit that everybody can experience good things from right away, business roundtables, speakers, that kind of thing. But I had partnerships that became so strong that we were sitting in planning sessions together scaffolding, the activities, the events, and things, so that teachers are teaching their standards through the lens of the career that the students are in, and that the events have a purpose in helping to produce a graduate that the community has decided together this is what they want to produce. And working on not just the academics or the CTE skills, but professional skills that help students get there, and helping to plan what that will look like. We had events where our partners were a part of actually building the event, so that partners held booths that students came to for not just career exploration, but culminating projects like learning about professionalism, and then actually having application at the booths, and exercises and competitions. And then the kinds of things led to internships and things for students. So I mean, it's all over the place. There's no end to what can happen when you have a partnership that people on both sides, I go back to Bruce, people on both sides helped build it. So they own it, and then they continue to grow in it. Now I'm complete.
Yeah, I thank you for that, and I'll try to be short. I guess the first one that comes to mind to me was a project I had a chance to work on. Golly, it seems like it was yesterday, but it's probably been 10 years now. And it was actually in rural Alabama, where there was a large, well-known car manufacturer who set up a physical plant in a very rural part of the state. And it didn't take long for the manufacturer to realize that the students graduating from the local high schools did not have the knowledge and skills that they needed so that they could hire them. And so you had the promise of good manufacturing middle-class jobs coming, but the school is not producing the students who had the skill sets and the knowledge to fill those jobs. And it seems so simple, but I know I came in as an outsider, and it was like, are you guys even talking? Have you been, I mean, have you sat down with the math teacher? You sat down with the science teacher? Have you developed these CTO programs? And the answer was no, and it's not, but you have to have those conversations. You have to be, you've got to get, we had to get telecoms involved to up the work in terms of connectivity. And from the school side, we had to stop thinking of school as something that you experience Monday through Friday from 8 to 3. I mean, we had to come up with flexible scheduling and letting students work in classes both virtually and face-to-face, and not being so concerned about time in chair, but actual learning and field experiences. And so that's just one example that immediately came to mind as I was thinking about that question.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to add that going back to one of the Paulas, it might have been Barkley, mentioned about professionalism. And I posted in the chat a link to our employability skills framework. So on that site, you can kind of see a lot of those, what we call employability skills. And what you'll find when you go to that site is part of what we discovered in developing that is that a lot of people call them a lot of different things, but they all kind of, what this effort did was try to put them in general buckets based on what the commonalities were across these thoughts of things like problem solving, communications, technology use. And so we look to have programs that embed these across the board, it's not a course on employability skills, but it's how do you embed employability skills into your current offerings.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you. That's a really great resource for folks. So we're going to open up for questions from the audience. We're going to begin with some questions that were submitted to us through Eventbrite. And if you who are in the audience live have questions, please take the time to write those into the Q&A box. So to get started, we're going to start with a question we got about partnership opportunities that are virtual and remote, right? So how can we build virtual remote partnership opportunities? Actually want to start with Paula B for this one.
Okay. Well, you know, everybody's being challenged to do that right now. So we have primarily had in-person relationships with partners, but overnight had to adjust to this new world. And it actually was our partners that came up with the ways to do it. Mm-hmm. And they are working hard to walk through their businesses and create virtual tours. They're having Zoom meetings, and they're for speaking engagements. They are actually working on projects together with groups of students over Zoom. So there are all kinds of ways to do it. And then, of course, there are some companies that have things already built that some communities are looking into. But because we already had strong partners, we were able to do it ourselves. Mm-hmm. Nashville.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Albert, we have a question that's pretty specific, but I think will be applicable to a couple different folks who are here. So the question is, we are a statewide virtual school. How does community engagement and partnership look specific to that situation?
Well, I think you have to look at what the areas you're looking to serve, the geographic areas you're looking to serve, and mm-hmm. really what partnerships work best for you. There might be some statewide partnerships or collaborations you might be able to do both across state agencies, mm-hmm. as well as with employers that might have a more statewide or regional presence. Mm-hmm. In addition, you might want to look at where your pockets of that you're looking to serve, the communities that you're looking to serve, and look for partners in those areas that are, really well connected, as some of the others had said before. Get to those core people that can influence your local areas. And when it comes to a rural area, understand that rural area and what they're looking, what are their issues, what problems are they trying to solve at the local level, at that community level. And then really work on bringing the partner that meets those needs to the table in an attempt to solve that, to serve those communities the best. So some of the, some statewide programs can do that better than others, depending on how they're organized and what resources they have. Sometimes it might need to be delegated or focused on a smaller local education agency or a regional consortium of LEAs. So there are a lot of different, I think there are a lot of different models, and I think there are good examples across the country of these. It's just a matter of finding them, because there's so many, there's so many local education agencies that it's hard from our standpoint at the federal level to know all of the various types of partnerships and collaboration that's going on.
Yeah, Albert, I'd piggyback on that. I think one of the advantages, since this question was, I think, specific for someone on a big virtual school, is that there are, there's about 30 states or so that have state-led or state-funded K-12 virtual learning programs. Mm-hmm. What some of these state virtual schools can do is they can bring scale to projects that are very local. Mm-hmm. You just described. I think of my time in Florida, where we got connected with some really outstanding work, with again in the careers of media development and TV and all of that. There was an awesome program that was only being accessible to students who happened to be in the Central Florida region. Well, we were able to scale that statewide. Or get a program in Lake City. They only had the only online, it was in a nursing program. And so if you didn't physically live there, you couldn't and they only served in a small geographic area. Well, the state virtual school would bring scale to that, where students now, regardless of where they were living, had access to these learning opportunities that they got.
And I think one thing also in relation to that, you're right that, you know, when you have a virtual school at the state level, that is you hopefully have some scale to that, and some state, you can carry the weight, you know, kind of the weight of the state behind you. You know, that when you get involved with the partnership, they can see that they would have exposure or connection with to the entire state rather than just a specific local area. So again, that's a priority for some organizations and not a priority for others that are wanting to be more focused on specific communities. So you have to find that right balance, because there might be some national or global employers. I know, like in Ohio, there's the Ohio and Michigan and Illinois region right there has some good regional economic development programs, and they are looking to bring together a lot of different organizations that are actually global in scale. So it might not be that it is something specific, you know, your local company that's wanting to do A, B, or C, or your state university. It might be a consortium of others but having that state presence as a virtual school helps you bring more exposure for that partner to the rest of the state.
That's super helpful. And I know, Paula C., you touched on this a little bit, but it's a question that we've gotten a bunch. So any tips on how to engage potential sponsors given the current conditions, and particularly, how can rural schools obtain funds that they so badly need to purchase technology during this pandemic? So I'll start with Albert and then go to Paula B. and then Paula C.
So I think, I know a lot of school districts have shifted some funding from that was focused on kind of the brick and mortar instruction over to technology. I know in our local area, they're distributing Chromebooks. The problem is there's a shortage of Chromebooks. So, so you know, rechanneling funding is just one part of it. So luckily they were able to do that, but now they're looking for more devices. And then beyond that, you know, to the extent you can engage partners to provide not just laptops or technology, those specific things, but maybe it could be broadband access. It could be a lot of other things that you're going to need to support your project. So there are different ways that different companies can provide. Maybe it's a Zoom subscription. Maybe it's, you know, some other things that you might need along the way. So I encourage you to kind of think beyond just getting money from an organization, but I mean, really hear what their interests are, get them engaged, build that relationship. And then typically once you build that relationship, then the offers for things start coming across. So I think it's, you know, don't focus so much on the money, but build that relationship, and then everything else hopefully will flow behind that.
And I would agree completely with that. What I also think though is in this particular situation, there are some businesses that are truly struggling. Some that have been great partners, like hotels, and they really cannot do the things they were doing, but they're staying engaged. But there are other businesses during this that are flourishing. And so part of this is knowing which industries are in your area, what's your workforce pipeline, but also where is the opportunity right now? Because opportunity is shifting. And there are companies out there that with the right return on investment for them, and I think that's part of it. We have to look at, yes, there's altruism involved, but there's also return on investment for business. What are we able to say is going to be there for them? And I think we've addressed that earlier, but I think that's very real in this segment.
I agree.
Yeah, I would add as well, when we talk about the current conditions, you know, I think there's, maybe there's I dare say almost like an advantage when you're going out trying to secure partners now. I think of, and I know I recognize some of the names in our participating tonight, and they've been with me on this journey as well. All of a sudden, online learning and distance learning is a new thing. We've been doing it for 30 some years, actually longer than that, but all of a sudden it's new. And maybe if nothing else, in the current conditions, you don't have to, as you think about this specific project, we're talking about distance learning and competency-based ed to, you know, give students opportunity for careers in IT and CTE, is at least now you don't have to really explain what this whole distance learning thing is. People, they may not be doing it well, but they're doing it, and they've got, at least they've got a baseline of understanding now that, wow, students really can learn this way. You can engage and communicate this way, and so I guess I'll try to look at it through that lens of the current conditions, as challenging as they are. It actually perhaps can help you in terms of building the case for why this is so important to do this through distance ed. And it's very specific skill sets we want students to have.
So one thing I'll kind of piggyback on that. Yes, we have, well, I mean, this project was conceived more than a year ago. And it didn't even think, I mean, you know, COVID wasn't anywhere near on the radar. So, so I think one thing, as we're working through the Rural Tech Project, it has this entry period. We have the accelerator period that's going to last for 2 years. So we need to think long-term, like what the long-term solutions are. But as Bruce mentioned, this is actually an opportunity to establish some of these firm foundations for better structures and infrastructure and scaffolding of programs that can be delivered online, through distance learning channels more effectively. So we're kind of forced into it rather than, I mean, this was initially going to be kind of you know, not experimental, but we wanted to see kind of how we can move this forward. Now we're kind of forced into it. So let's capitalize on this opportunity. Let's strengthen the programs. Let's build some good models, and then with the goal of, you know, 2 years down the road, when we're choosing the winners, that we can hopefully have some good experiences from this that can persist beyond a post-COVID environment.
Thank you. So Bruce, actually, we're gonna ask you this question. What are ways to build strong partnerships with rural Indigenous families? It's something that we've actually gotten this question in a few different places, so we wanted to address it here.
I'm sorry, you broke up a bit. I'm sorry.
Oh, sure.
It's
so
probably on my end. I apologize.
No worries. So how can schools, local educational agencies, communities build strong partnerships with rural Indigenous families?
Yeah, I have to be honest, I don't have as much experience in that as maybe some of my other colleagues do here today. But I mean, I have done a little bit of work in that in places like New Mexico,
right.
For example. And again, I think it's bringing, you know, reaching out to the community groups that are providing support services outside of the school to those communities is vitally important, and also going at it with a very, you know, listening to them, hearing from them. What are the challenges that they're facing? Not putting, for those of us who aren't Indigenous, putting our value system onto what we think they should be doing or what we think they should be learning, but really respecting their values and their culture, how we actually can work together. So, I mean, that's maybe not the perfect answer, but I would just say, again, it's about listening and respecting and honoring, you know, their needs first.
Right. Thank you. Paula B, same question. What are the ways that potential entrants and folks who are working to build partnerships can engage rural Indigenous families.
Well, I very much agree with Bruce on the listening part and knowing, really understanding what they're looking for. But I also think whether it's Indigenous or any other group of people, looking at what they want and then looking at what supports would they need to have that. Like what interventions, what support systems would be helpful besides access? Access to opportunities, great, but how do we prepare them to be able to optimize those opportunities? So I think that's the second step after the listening.
That's super helpful. Both understanding and also being able to offer the support.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So Albert, this one's for you. Is it better to apply as a joint powers authority or an individual school district when you are building a submission for the Rural Tech Project?
I think you have to look at what the solution you're trying to achieve. This is a challenge, so we're looking for new ideas, new models, and new innovations in the space of competency-based education delivered through distance learning for IT career pathways. So how do you make that most effective for the communities you're looking to serve? So if it is a collaboration of multiple LEAs, then that's fine. In the submission, we require that there is either one lead local education agency or one lead high school. So it's either or. So you just have to choose what LEA within that. You may have a separate agreement for the joint authority, but you have to find one local education agency to be the lead, and one or one high school. There are some other eligibility requirements like serving 9 through 12 in rural communities, but as far as the entities go, it can be a high school or an LEA as a lead entrant. But collaboration is definitely encouraged with anybody and everybody that you can bring in. I mean, just think about the ecosystem model more than the going at it alone model.
Thank you, Albert. So switching over to questions that we've had from the audience today. The first one is about the database. So how can we find collaborators through the database that's being created who may want to partner and or apply for the opportunity that we are offering? Albert, you can talk to this and then I can answer any follow-up questions.
Sure, let me first say everything wrong and then you can correct me. No, so the point of the database is we've been getting a lot of questions about, hey, I have this product or service to offer. Hey, I'm interested in serving. We're a nonprofit. We really want to help in this space. How do we do that? And then we've also heard from potential entrants that say, hey, how do you do this? Or how do you do that? Or where can I find out more information about, let's say, online learning platforms or something where they might not have experience? So the purpose of the database is to connect those seekers and those solvers or providers together. We're trying to do it in a way that is not too much of a, we don't want this to be a sales exercise, but we do want this to be able to connect the seekers with the providers. So Ishokay, you can kind of go through the process that's involved on how participants and interested parties can participate.
Sure. So the form asks that you give us a little information about you. Are you offering a service? Are you looking for team members? Are you looking for services? It also asks that you tell us a little bit about your area of expertise. That all gets put together into a spreadsheet, and then that gets sent out to schools, districts, local educational agencies once a week, and then they'll be able to reach out. If let's say, for example, a school is looking for a learning management system, and someone who who puts their information into the database is offering that service, and the school will reach out and say, hey, you know, I got your information from the Rural Tech Project. How can we collaborate? So it's really an opportunity for folks who are looking to work together to have that information all in one place, so that it's easy to work through and not have to sort of spend a lot of time on Google trying to figure out the best way forward. So the form that John just put into the chat is where you can fill out that information if you haven't already done so. Thank you to the folks who've already filled out that form. And if you have any more questions about that, definitely feel free to reach out to us, and I can answer those for you. So want to get through a couple more questions. One is, setting aside larger companies for a moment, how do you implement your programs to entities that need skills such as carpentry, plumbing, or electricians, right? So I will start with Paula B. Knowing that this is a technology education program, like, what are your suggestions for thinking about, you know, working with working with smaller entities?
Well, I think there's a place always for smaller entities. I think some of our most powerful work has come from smaller entities. Depends on the workforce needs of that area. If there is a critical shortage, then there usually are people who are interested in helping to develop that workforce pipeline. And so again, it starts with knowing your community and the needs in that community, and then having real relationships that will help you to develop a program virtually, and in some cases in person. But it you know, if this is about virtual, then how are we going to provide that in the trades? So, you know, there are programs that do that. There are relationships with community colleges. There are small businesses that are happy to get engaged in designing that. And I think we get stopped because we can't envision how that could look, but companies are doing a lot of training virtually, so it doesn't stop them, even if they're smaller.
Perfect.
Well, and one thing I'd like to add is that, you know, if they begin to think of themselves as a consortium, I mean, think how powerful that can be. And one of our communities was HVAC that came together, and they had 6 smaller companies. One was a medium size, so they could take a few more students, but they broke down the curriculum and the skills that they wanted students to see, and each of them agreed what they would share and showcase, and students rotated through their internship, and every business partner had a different element that moved that student towards certification. So, you know, that's a great way to do it on what can they absolutely focus on and do really well.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. We really, really, really appreciate your time and your energy, and your thoughtful responses to these questions. We are going to put Bruce, Paula B, and Palacios' email information in the chat. So if you have questions, you can definitely reach out to them. We're also going to put Albert's information in the chat because Albert's great and has answers to many, many questions. We want to get a temperature check on how this webinar went for you. So there's going to be another poll. It's just 2 questions to close us out. The poll is, how helpful was this session? And then what are some things that you would find helpful, right? We are trying to create some resources for you so that you have what you need to feel like you can build a great proposal.
One thing I'll add is if there is, for number 2, if there's something else that's not listed there and you're going to check other, feel free to add the other into the chat box.
Yes, please. And we'll make sure to read through those so that we have a strong understanding of what it is that folks are looking for.
While everyone's answering, I want to thank everybody for their interest in their participation both in this webinar and their interest in the Rural Tech Project. For those of you who are not familiar with the Ed Prizes portfolio of challenges and competitions, this is the 4th one that we launched, and it's because we want to see some new and innovative ideas. That's redundant. Some innovative ideas of how distance education can be implemented in rural communities, but also competency-based education, because this project actually brings together 3 or 4 key things that are whole topics in themselves. But we really want to see what some cool models out there that can bring the 3 or 4 together. So thanks again for all of your interest and your participation. We have we look forward to your submissions. We look forward to all of those who are not LEAs or high schools to find local education agencies and high schools to work with. And if you don't have one in your area, please knock on their doors, call their phones. Well, don't knock on their doors these days. Call their phones, connect with their Zooms, and you know, get connected with your local communities and find out how you can help and what help is needed. So, thanks again.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate everyone contributing to this poll. It really helps us understand the best way to create resources for you. So right now we have a strong, helpful vibe here for how helpful was this session. And then it looks like folks are really interested in learning more about using workforce data to inform program design and adapting to limited internet. We are going to be, and competency-based education. So we're going to be publishing a post on adapting to limited connectivity on our website. So please make sure you sign up for our newsletter. It will also have announcements on the next webinar and on the responses from the first webinar. The Q&A responses will go out. So make sure you sign up for the newsletter so that you get those informed announcements right to your inbox. And if you have any further questions, please make sure that you send those over to hello@ruraltechproject.com. I know we've had a couple folks ask about the community engagement manager. There is a ton of information about that particular role in the entrant resources page, so that you have an understanding of what that role is. And then if you have any further questions, definitely reach out. Thank you all so much, panelists, for joining. Really appreciate your insight. And thank you all, audience. We really, really, really hope that this was helpful for you, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everybody.